So in this segment, we're going to be talking about this clown Brexiteer saying that Brexit is like the American movement for independence, or the American War of Independence. And this man is this is moronic.
If you'd said to George Washington, do you know you're leaving the world's greatest empire? You may have a small percentage loss of GDP, therefore you shouldn't do it. He would have laughed at you. He'd have said, we are going to have a self-governed United States, and we will make a success of it.
Also, just want to add here, no one really joins an empire by choice. Normally, you're forced into joining an empire. So his first point doesn't even make sense.
And that is what I think.
Well, hang on, so they wanted to be independent. I mean, we were already an independent nation, so I'm not quite sure that stands up to scrutiny.
But we were being subsumed into ever greater control from the centre in Brussels, undoubtedly so.
That's not true, because we had a veto. So if there were member states that wanted more kind of centralised power in the EU, it wouldn't have worked because we could veto it.
And people thought that we could succeed as an independent nation outside the EU.
So I'm no expert in the American War of Independence. Most of my knowledge comes from Assassin's Creed 3. But there was, of course, the Boston Massacre, which a street fight occurred between a patriot mob throwing snowballs, stones and sticks at a squad of British soldiers. And the British soldiers decided the best course of action was to use live rounds and effectively killed these people. So that wasn't great. So that was one of the reasons why I think the Americans rebelled against us. Also, the fact that, there was the Boston Tea Party. You might be questioning, what kind of tea party was it? Well, they were angry at the British for imposing more taxes on the Americans, taxation without representation, they argued, and they dumped 342 chests of tea imported by the British India Company into the harbour, and tea was worth a lot of money back then, a lot more than it is now, because it was much harder to get. What the street value of the tea was, I don't know. But there was a lot of tea, and the British were unhappy about it. So, he wants to argue about the American War of Independence. You can't compare it. They talked about taxation without representation. We have representation, or we had representation whilst we were members of the EU. We had MEPs, we had the Council of Ministers, which we were on, and we played a large part in the formation of EU rules. So for him to compare it to the American War of Independence makes no sense. And then he makes the GDP argument and sovereignty. No, Brexiteers told us we'd be poorer because of the referendum. We should remember that. And we don't have control. Now, if you look at what Phil from A Different Bias argues, and I actually agree with him on some of his points, where he talks about if you want to export to a country, you have to adhere to their standards. So for us to export to the EU, we have to follow EU standards on certain goods. So it's just ridiculous arguments from a ridiculous character talking about the American War of Independence. And his arguments were so ridiculous that Fiona Bruce interrupted a Conservative MP. That's how outlandish his claims were. Could you imagine being that outlandish that Fiona Bruce actually does her job? This man doesn't have to imagine it because he lived it. He lived the interruption. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.